Hey, folks, welcome to the Battles of the First World War podcast. Joining us today on the podcast is Michel Gravel, author of several books on World War I. You may not have heard of him, as his books have been published in France, and so they are, of course, in the French language. But we are here to change that today as he focuses on an area of the Western Front that does not always get a lot of attention, the Arras sector in 1918. And very specifically, the sector between Arras and Cambrai. So Michel is French-Canadian, based in Ontario, Canada. He has worked in construction sales since before 1995. However, Michel visited the Somme battlefield somewhat by mistake in 1984 when he was 16, and there he discovered the cemeteries. To use a cliched line, the rest is history, but history that he has been writing. So, Michel, welcome and thanks for coming on the podcast this evening.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
All right. So we'll just kick into the questions so we can get to know you. So, if you would you expand a little bit on your personal history and on what exactly about the Somme and visiting those cemeteries got you into the Great War?
Well, there's two steps to my evolution. I remember, 3rd Canadian Division was at D-Day on June 6, 44. So when the 40th anniversary, I was 16, was on TV. We only had TV at the time. I was glued to it. And then I thought, oh my God, this will be the last ceremony. It's been 40 years. These guys are so old. And then I watched it, and my mother said, "Would you like to go see it?" So she booked. We went out in August 1984, but we decided we'd do a roundabout route from Paris up to the Netherlands, up down the coast to Normandy and back. Being typical North Americans, we assumed we'd be in the Netherlands. Like we got into Paris at Charles de Gaulle in August 1984 at about 8 a.m., which is really early. My dad got the car, and I guess we'll be in the Netherlands like by dinner. But then I didn't realize how much stuff there was to see. Like, wow, look at that church, look at this, look at that. And then we ended up in Chateau Thierry. But I correct me if I'm wrong. It's about 40 kilometers. I work in kilometers, but 40 kilometers from Arras, I think it is. And I remember seeing on the ridge this classical. It looked like the Parthenon.
Mm-hmm.
And we went in the evening, and it turned out it was the American memorial at Chateau Thierry. So the first Great War memorial I saw on the Western Front was it commemorated basically the 3rd Division, or like the whole American effort at Chateau Thierry, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then we went through Laon, and then they explained to us how the whole town had been leveled. And then we took a route up through the Somme completely by mistake, and I didn't know we were going to follow the départemental, which is like a county road.
Right.
That was basically the front line of July 1st, 1916. But we hit our first British cemetery, and to this day, I'm not sure which one it was. I have a log, and I have some blurry pictures. But hey, look, there's a war cemetery. Well, there's probably only one around. We better stop and look at it, right? So we stopped, and then I was struck by the headstone, "A soldier of the Great War, known unto God," and I took a picture of it, and that's the first picture I took in a Commonwealth cemetery or any Great War cemetery. And I have a couple of shots, and then and then the cemeteries kept coming. What that is, it's for the Ulster Division. Commemorates their action on the 1st of July, 1916. I didn't know what it was, but I was completely amazed as to how many cemeteries there were. And we ended up completely by accident at Beaumont Hamel. which is the Newfoundland Park.
Right.
And then we saw we're not Newfoundlanders. Newfoundland doesn't even they're like they're a new addition to Canada, but they had the caribou, and wow. And all I could think of, I knew nothing about the 1st of July 1916. I remember thinking, what happened here? Like when you've seen the Commonwealth cemeteries, you go into a gully and you see 3 cemeteries and they're all dated within a week apart. You go, what happened here? Something happened here, and that's how I felt. And we made it to Popperinge in Belgium. Decided to turn back because we stopped at Vimy, the Vimy Memorial. We went to Vimy,
Right.
kind of by accident, because we were going up by the Somme. If you go straight up towards the Netherlands, you're going to hit Vimy, and then we got. I remember because I saw a Chevron gas station, which I didn't know they had that. And a guy with a horse-drawn wagon bringing stuff around. This was 84. Europe is different. It was closer to 1945 than it is to today. The Europe of 1984. And then we went back, and then we went to Dieppe, where that's a famous Canadian battle, and then we went to Normandy, and I don't want to talk about that. But that's how I was introduced to the Great War. And I never gave it any thought until about 2000, when I saw a Great War documentary, and then I asked my mom. I said, because we're good French Canadians. We don't fight in foreign wars. We're good. Like we're like Quakers. That's it. We don't go. But I said, didn't you say you're? I remember when I was a kid, my mother saying he fought in the trenches, and I go, Did your uncle, what did he do? So she went to see her cousin, and she came home and had all his correspondence, and he was a French Canadian. All one-way. We don't have the replies, but we have all his correspondence to his older sister, who was already married and living away, and to my grandmother, who was born in 1907, and the rest of the family. And I read these stories. So I went to the National Archives, and back in 2001, they had released the service records partially.
Okay.
And so I got his service file, and it said that he was a conscript, which upset me because his daughter said, no, my father volunteered, but he was only in the war a year and he didn't do anything. And then as my evolution as a historian, I realized this is oral history, and you use it as a starting point for research, but it's not definitive. So he was, in fact, a conscript, and he seemed to have done nothing because in Canada, I don't know if the British did this, but we had a casualty form. When you were changed assignment, they would stamp the date, what unit you were detached from. If you were in a training battalion, you were detached to a reinforcement camp, then you were. So his form said he arrived at the front on August 29, 1918. I had no idea where.
Okay.
And then he reported for sore feet on December 13, 1918. And I go, well, that's boring.
Right.
Really, sore feet, like really. And I didn't realize what he had endured. So then I went and got the official history. I wanted to know what he had done between August 29 and that. And then I found, long story short, I could go on about where he had been. So
yep.
In Canada in 2001, you could, if you went in person to the archives in Ottawa, they had microfilmed in the 60s, the war diaries. Okay. They're now digitized online. I don't think you guys enjoy that in the U.S. for the First World War. So then I got very familiar. Oh, he was participating at the Battle of the Drocourt-Queant line. He was in the capture of the village of Cagnicourt. 3 weeks later, he crossed the Canal du Nord, which was the left flank of the Hindenburg Line offensive.
Okay.
He participated in the capture of Saint-Lé-Marquion. 3 days later, he was thrown into the Montigny Ravine, which these are all things you've never heard of. Well, the locals had never heard of that. And reached the objective and was pushed back to the start line. He was with 1st Canadian Division. He participated in what was, in 4 years on the Western Front, the second defeat of the 1st Canadian Division, which is a record unmatched in the British Empire. To have lost ground twice in 4 years. They always won. And then I speak French, so I started calling the locals, the mairies, and the can I come down? Can I go see the village of Cagnicourt where he fought? I found a guy on a bulletin board saying I collect postcards of my village. I'd like to trade, so I contacted him and said, I don't have anything to give you, but can I use your pictures? And then we became fast friends. And my daughter, I just drove her to the airport. She's going to Paris to show her boyfriend Paris. She's known the kids of this guy since 2004. They're like cousins. They send baby clothes across the ocean, and a really warm story.
That's cool. That's really cool.
So then I convinced the company commander was a hero. It was that I have videos on this, but the company commander was a hero. I suggested to the village, what would you like to do? They said we'd like to name our town square for the company commander, my great uncle's company commander. So I flew down in June of 2003, which was my first modern trip to the Western Front. And then I remember they had planned for my visit, and I was sitting in an 1850s barn that had survived the war, and I pointed to the troop movements. Without any bearings outside. I knew what cardinal direction I was pointing. And then they said, where did you learn all of this? And then they threw away all the research they had done. And they said, we'd like to name the town square for the company commander. And they put up a memorial to the brigade, which my great uncle was part of. And then I did the next village over. And then the problem is people ask me, why do I keep staying in the same part of the front? Well, it's because I got good at it. And then you have success. People ask you, what happened in our village? Like what happened in, and then I started writing books, and I've written 5. Well, I've written 7 in French. 5 are published. 1 I'm going to do on Amazon. I'm going back in September to sharpen up one of my chapters.
Okay.
But the battle, I do 3 villages at a time, and it took me 20 years to write the story of the advance from Arras to Cambrai. I probably lost your listeners, but it turned into a bigger proposition.
So a couple of things. By the advance from Arras to Cambrai, you're talking about in late like August, September of 19...
August 26, 1918, and the Canadians entered Cambrai October 9. Okay. And I've written 5 books, and the 5 books have gotten me halfway down the road.
Wow. Can I back up or backtrack? Sure. Just
sorry, I'm wordy.
No. But there's something that got stuck in my head, and I really want to find out more about it. You mentioned when we started talking that you are from a family of good French Canadians, and you don't fight in foreign wars. You're like the Quakers. I have heard little bits and pieces about this, but I have to say, this is a subject that I'm totally ignorant of. So can you just enlighten us a little bit? What do you mean by that? Because I don't know. I suspect probably many Americans, many folks overseas probably don't know what you meant by that.
Well, I think I'm on both my mother and father's side. I think it's 11th or 13th generation. Both my mother's family goes back to the 1670s. My dad, late 1630s. We don't know what ship he came on.
Hmm.
Actually, my 11 time removed great grandfather,
Oh,
his name was, uh, what's his name? Um, Brindiet, that was his nickname, Twiggy. He was really small, Gravel. He's also the same level great grandfather of Madonna.
oh,
Well, I'm Madonna's cousin like 19 times removed, which is kind of cool.
folks, we've got a practically a celebrity here. This
Yeah,
is awesome.
no, but they settled in the Upper St. Lawrence, and then the British came a couple of times.
Yep.
A guy named Phipps from Massachusetts actually attacked Quebec, and they beat it off. And then Quebec City is really interesting in North America, but it had 4 sieges, which is more than any city in the Civil War, like in its history. So anyway, in 1759, the British actually scaled the walls, took the town, burnt the ancestral Gravel home, the roof down, which we're still sore about. That's why we don't go fight for the British Empire.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then in 1763, the French ceded Canada in favor of Martinique. I think they wanted the sugar plantations in the Caribbean coast, so we were dealt out. So that by 1763, I am guessing there were 6 or 7,000 French Canadians there, and my ancestors were there, and they had a couple of British administrators that said, all we've done is swapped out a king for another king. Let them speak French. Let them be Catholic. So as much as people in Quebec slammed these British governors, in the end, they could have put the kibosh to French culture, and then strangely enough, it survived. And I speak, my first language is French, and even in Ontario, my parents moved. I'm born in Ontario. My parents are from Montreal,
Okay.
originally like ancestrally from Quebec City, but so we kept the language because of some of these guys. But there was always some animosity. And then when Britain went to the Boer War, a lot of French Canadians, I'm not an expert on this, I'm talking through my hat, but they were a lot of sympathizers for the Boers.
I see.
And then in the First World War, there was really a lot of racism. The French wanted their own battalions, and Sam Hughes, the minister of militia, was an Orangeman. I don't know if you use that term in the States, like a staunch Protestant.
I see.
No, we're the British Empire, and you're going to conform and everything else, and so that really abated volunteerism. But finally, a French Canadian businessman raised the Royal 20. Well, it's now called the Royal 22nd Regiment, but the 22nd Regiment at the time. And then there was a succession. Very slowly, they started recruiting French Canadians. But when conscription came in January of 1918, the French would have none of it. They thought it was the wars have always been touchy, which is why my French books aren't sold in Canada. I went to the War Museum. I said, I have books. I'll import them. I'll pay the transport fee. Will you carry my books at the War Museum in Ottawa? And they said, Mr. Gravel, French books on war don't sell here. So,
Oh, that's too bad.
yeah. So is that a too long an answer for you? What that's
Nope. That's honestly.
Well, my great uncle was a conscript, and all the conscripts that were easy to get, they were called up in the end of December 1917. for their physicals, and then they got their letters in the mail in January. So swaves of men reported as conscripts. A
Mhm.
lot of men refused. My great uncle, I found out through his letters that he applied legally for it deferred his enlistment because he applied for a what do you call it, an exemption,
Okay.
because he was an agricultural worker, and that was denied. And the family lore is that my great grandfather was a staunch imperialist, even though he was French. He said they said if he signed off saying he needed him on the farm, he would be exempt. And he said no, his son, his other son, who's 15, can take up his spot if we exempt everybody who's going to fight for us. And the family lore is my great grandmother never spoke to him again
Oh.
because she had no power. She tried to hire a lawyer apparently, and couldn't. But then when I read his letters, when he got to England, he started saying, "Oh, everybody on the concession. Do you call that country roads in the States? Are they called concessions?" He's
Uh,
talking about, you know, like the little roads between farms, we
sure.
call them concessions. All
Okay.
the guys in concessions are laughing at me because I actually submitted because they were all hiding. And he said, you know, he converted. He said, they need us here. They need us to be here. And then he talked about his training with the Lewis gun and how fascinated he was by being trained on the Lewis gun. And he completely converted. And he survived the war.
Mhm.
And when France capitulated in 1940, apparently in the kitchen, he slammed his glass down. He said, I don't believe we have to do this again." And he went down and enlisted again.
Wow. Wow. That's impressive. Wow. What a story. What was your great uncle's name? Just
Well,
so.
it's a really odd name, is Zotique, Zotique. And his ancestor was Scots, Reid, Reid. So his first line, Reid.
Wow.
And he's part of the focus of my first book. But all my research has left him behind. Like he's just a foot soldier, right? I moved on to other things, but I always thought the story was great. Where in 1940, his daughter said he slammed down when he heard on the radio that France had capitulated. He answered de Gaulle's call. De Gaulle made a call to specifically. There's a famous call to arms by de Gaulle, but
Mhm.
he did another one specifically to French Canadians to mobilize, to come help France, and he mobilized. He was in his 40s, and he guarded prisoners. He went to Halifax, and he has the British War Medal for World War II and the Volunteer Medal, but he never went overseas. He was too old, and he wasn't like an officer material or anything like that. But he managed a conscript, a French Canadian conscript, and then he was so committed he went back. He said he couldn't believe France fell again. Like we went through all that. Isn't that like amazing? You don't get that in like the history books.
Yeah, no, that is it's wild, and I'm for World War II. He guarded prisoners and everything, but he still did his job because by him doing that job of guarding prisoners, even in his
Well, he
40s.
volunteered for overseas service, and he got
Yeah,
vetted to a more appropriate role, I guess.
sure.
So,
But even that, that freed up another guy, a younger guy, I suppose, to go over and fight in Europe, like to be part of the attacking.
okay, can you now think of all the veterans you talked about the Great War, how they felt when France fell in 1940, and then he's my symbol for that. How they
Right.
felt like, oh my God, we did it for nothing.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, yeah. Wow. I also I want to step back here for a second. So we've been talking now for a little bit and talking about your history and how you become interested in the Great War. And I have to give a
Do you want to talk
huge.
about Arras?
No, we will in just a second. But I want to talk about your mother for offering to take you over there to see the D-Day remembrance ceremonies in the
Well,
80s.
why is everybody amazed by that? I have friends that I tell that story to now. You mean your mother? Yeah, my mother. Do you want to go? Oh, she said in French, "Veux-tu y aller?" Uh, sure.
That's amazing.
And they made me pay my own plane ticket,
Huh?
but they paid the expenses over there.
That's amazing, though. That's amazing. I mean, it makes me think so of my own parents. So when I was 15, my we used to spend summers in Portugal, and
Oh, really?
yeah, yeah. And when I was 15 years old, one of the villages, like about an hour away, the local like district newspaper came out and said, "Oh, in such and such a village, there's a gentleman he's at the time he was celebrating his 100th birthday, and he was a veteran of World War I." And my parents always knew that I was into military history as long as I'd been reading, and I remember reading the newspaper, and I was like, "Gosh, it's amazing! Like, wouldn't it be so cool to like meet this guy and like talk to him?" And my parents didn't say anything, but then like about a week later, they were like, "Let's go take a ride." And we actually wound up driving to this gentleman's village, and we just asked around until we met his daughter, and his daughter went and got him, and she was like, "Hey, like this young man like wants to speak to you." So
And you wish you could come up with a new list of questions now
oh,
today.
definitely, but I remain ever ever grateful to my parents, who they weren't always so happy that I was really into military history. But they, despite their misgivings, I guess they still were like, you know what, he's really interested. It'd be cool. Like he would really appreciate seeing this guy. So let's go see him. So I really appreciate it. It makes me think of my parents. What your mom did, like nurturing that interest that you had. So super cool, super cool. So let's get into Arras. So I think we see you've got a family connection, but of course, that just gets you into the area. Now you've got French nationals in these villages asking you, like what happened here, what happened in our village. So is it? I've got my question here is like, why the focus on Arras? What draws you to it? Is so now you've got your great uncle's connection, but you've got friends now, and you're connected to these communities. Is that what
Well,
continues?
well, my birthday is September 11th,
Oh,
and my readers are having a surprise party for me somewhere on the Western Front, September 11th. So that's
so you're in that world. So you're in that world, and that's what keeps drawing you to it. Now, writing histories. Why? So I've got here what drove you to write histories of these events. I think I'm just going to modify that just a little bit. Like why in French? Like bigger audience.
well. I wrote a very amateurish book called Tough as Nails in 2006. And I sell industrial roofing to engineers and architects and heavy industry. And I was writing a book about an Ottawa roofer named John Hilliard Foley, who was probably we call it an CSM, Company Sergeant Major, which is the first sergeant
Yep.
for my great uncle at the Canal du Nord. And I tracked down his family. He was 4 times decorated, which in the British Empire, that's really odd. Like 4 times. Usually you were dead by the second time. He arrived at the front in February of 15 and fought on till January of 18, was wounded twice, decorated twice, sent to a training position in England, in the south of England. And then his brother, who was an observer, was disappeared on the Western Front in March. Through German sources, they found out that they found the body. He was dead, and he decided that he was going to end the war himself. And he came back to my great uncle's unit, and on I don't know, you know what the Distinguished Conduct Medal is? Yeah, the British well, he won it on Friday at the Canal du Nord, lost all his officers, so took command of his company. Monday, he's issued a new set of officers for the company, goes into battle again. Long story short, he loses all his officers again, takes command of the company, second Distinguished Conduct Medal. Oh, after the second DCM, he went back. He was sent home, and I wrote a book about him. And the company sponsored a privately printed book about this guy for an engineering conference in Ottawa. We sell roofing. The guy was a roofer from Ottawa. The conference was in Ottawa. Then CEF Books picked it up. I made it longer. A tiny publisher in Ottawa. And then I shopped it around. He was too small. Well, he's not too small. It's just hard to get published. Yeah. I couldn't get an English publisher in Canada after that. I tried in England. I got nice rejection letters in England, but I tried 3 times in France, and I found a publisher in Normandy. So my books are all in French because my only publisher is French.
Gotcha.
So I've been writing for the French market. That's why I'm kind of here. I'm a roof salesman. Over there, I'm a foreign expert. So.
All right.
So I've been publishing. I've been publishing in French since then, but I don't write a book about the whole advance from Arras to Cambrai. It's 6 weeks, and Canada lost, I'm guessing, about 7,500 killed going 20 miles in 6 weeks, and there was a 3-week hiatus. We had a division and an armor brigade in Italy for a year and a half, and they lost 6,000 killed. So imagine here we lost 7,500 in two-week chunks of fighting, and then nobody's ever heard of this in Canada. The Arras-Cambrai Road. Nobody has ever heard of it. And in my first book, I'm going to show you. Can you see?
Yes.
This is the book I hate the most. It's a translation of Tough as Nails. Okay. It's not a translation. I rewrote it in French. I found it amateurish, and I over-explain things, and I'm the worst critic of this book. But it is my most famous book. And in it, I say, the Arras-Cambrai Road, to me, is a highway of heroes. And some of my fans read that and took it to heart. And now they've renamed the highway of Canada's Highway of Heroes. So,
which saw.
It's really like, what? It's really moving to have an impact when you write a book like that.
And I've seen those signs when I've driven on that Arras-Cambrai Road.
That's because I wrote a book once.
Wow. And here we are. That's amazing. Well, look at that. But look at that. That's amazing.
Yeah. I'm about to cry right now. Like, it was like when they said we're gonna, and it's not officially renamed. The village council just said we're the first village. We're putting up the sign, and that's what we're calling it. Like a very unbureaucratic, very right-wing strain of Frenchmen did that. Like, no, we're not dealing with the bureaucracy. We're just putting up the sign, and we're paying for it. But now you go down the road, it's this Canada's Highway of Heroes. And what's really, really amazing, unlike the Americans or most allies, the dead are still there. And when you go down the road, on each side of the road, you'll get guys from August 26th. You've been to Wancourt. Then you go a little farther, August 29, a little farther, September 1st, then September 2nd. And they're all, the men that were killed along that road are still there. And why do I keep working on that road? Because nobody knows about it. It's like if Gettysburg, nobody knew about it. Would you spend your whole life promoting the Battle of Gettysburg?
Right.
The Gettysburg battlefield.
Right. Folks, for folks listening, Michel just brought up a British cemetery at Wancourt in France. Michelle helped me visit that because there's a gentleman from my hometown where I'm recording from right now who is buried in that cemetery. So he's an American. He enlisted with the Canadians, and he was killed in action in the Arras sector on the
And on my battlefield.
yeah, on the Drocourt-Quéant line at the end of August, and he's buried with the other men of his unit who also fell on that day, and other Canadian troops. So that's part of my connection here with Michelle. Michelle, moving on here, like the process of writing these histories, you were talking about early days, early 2000s. Still doing things on microfiche and before things moved online. The process of writing your histories, how much of that research has involved like trips to France, or are you able to do most things online?
No, I since 2003, I don't count like 1984.
Right.
My daughter asked me because I just dropped my daughter off at the Montreal airport. She's taking her boyfriend to see Paris, and she was a Vimy guide. She worked for 4.5 months in Arras at the Vimy Memorial, so she's very much connected to France. She said how her boyfriend's how often have you been there? And I'm guessing 18 times. Not sure anymore.
Yep.
I don't count anymore because I've flown for the weekend to verify something when I had more money.
Mm-hmm.
I'd asked my ex, she loved France. And I got to go to Arras. I got to see where this newsreel was photographed. I think I know where it was, but I can't write my book until I know for sure. And I would go. So some years I've gone twice. It's all boots on the ground. Well, I'm always afraid to go to the mailbox because it's always bad news if something comes in the mail. And then I pulled out a letter from the Embassy of France, and the Embassy of France. I thought maybe they were inviting me to like a ceremony. Then I opened it up, and the ambassador wrote to me in French, and he said, "By decree of the President of France, you've been elevated to the rank of Knight of the National Order of Merit for your services." And I was just having dinner on my way home from Montreal, and I look, they only give 65 knighthoods like that to foreigners every year. That's it. And so I was like completely flabbergasted. Um, but I've had an impact. My first, did you ever hear the book, The First Day on the Somme?
Yeah, Martin Middlebrook. Yes.
Yeah, well, Martin Middlebrook opened the Battle of the Somme with a book called The First Day on the Somme, and my friend Glenn said, "You keep poo-pooing your first book." My first book is called "Getting from Arras to Cambrai the Long Way." That's the French title. That's what it says.
Okay.
And it hooked people in France. It's in its second printing. It's almost a bestseller. But everybody in Arras who's into the Great War has read my book. I get the mail I get is for that book, and I hate the book, but it opened it to French tourism. People use my book as a battlefield guide. The greatest honor I got is a Frenchman met me at a ceremony, and he had his book with me. He wanted me to sign it, and he said, "Your book is very precise. I've been all over the battlefield." So like a historian can't get a greater compliment than that. Your book is very precise.
That's excellent.
And all my other books are accessory to all that. Who gets to have written something that changed like that? Like I'm so fortunate that I hated that book, and then it keeps getting printed, and people keep buying it, and people keep going on the battlefield with it because I made it kind of as a travel log when I wrote it, and I explained the context of the war, and then the battalion that I'm following a battalion, and people really enjoyed because I had a very I wish my stuff was in English because I think I'd have people who would read my stuff. But yeah, so that was a very emotional moment. Once when I was in Saint-Lay-Marquis on the Canal du Nord near Arras Cambrai Road, a lady came to me and said, "Could you sign my book?" And she had about 30 posted notes in my book of so people are that stupid book that I can't stand. People are using it to go to the battlefield. I think a lot of authors are like that. They have a piece of work they hate, but everybody loves. I think filmmakers have that. They make a movie that they can't stand, but everybody loves it. So,
Yeah,
is that I don't know. Is
we can be our own worst critics sometimes. But it sounds to me
yeah.
like the court of public opinion is that you've done quite a job with your book there. You've mentioned, I think you alluded to some other commemorative projects that you've been working on. I think there's something, I know we've shared emails back and forth about Banting. Can you, and you're going to France here soon to
Yeah, well,
receive this award.
I've been involved in 9 memorials.
Okay, can you tell us about
Um,
them?
my most the one I love the most is the Frederick Banting who invented insulin. Yeah, well, he discovered insulin. He was a co-discoverer, and uh, I went looking in 2010 for his field hospital, and I couldn't find it. It was in a quarry, and I was in the quarry, and so like if you could see, maybe when you edit this, you can link some of my presentations that are on YouTube.
Mhm.
But my one of my in high school was diabetic, and I hadn't seen him in 5 years, and I went into the quarry desperately looking like where could Dr. Banting's field hospital have been, and we were working on scant evidence. 3 days later, I'm somewhere else in France, and I found out on Facebook while I was in the quarry thinking of Mark. I said I got to call Mark that I'm this close to Banting's because he's the guy. He was diabetic, so he's the one who told me about Banting in the '80s.
Okay.
I got to tell him. I got to tell him I'm this close to it. And then he died of a diabetic coma
Mm.
while at the precise moment I was there. And I swore I would find it. And in January 2023, with the help of my posse, the building still survives. We found it, and we did a GoFundMe. I think he contributed to it, and now we got a flagpole, and on September 2nd, I have my friend Glenn is going to raise the flag on the memorial. That's the final touch of what we were doing. I'm so proud of that. But I got a lot of support for it because it wasn't just a Great War thing. It was an insulin thing.
Yes.
And now I'm dating a girl named Shelley Kaeble, but she goes by Duguay, her married name. And then she told me, well, finally she said my maiden name is Kaeble, Kaeble. That's a really odd name in Canada. I said, you're shitting me. She's from Ontario, from Toronto. I go, is your family from Quebec? And she said, yeah. My grandfather moved to Sudbury from Quebec, and then we moved to Toronto. You're the Quebec Cables. Well, Joseph Kaeble was the first French Canadian to win the Victoria Cross at a place called Neuville-Vitasse in Arras. She's
Okay.
many times removed cousin. She's from the same Kaeble. It was a German name that got changed when they in the 1700s
Hmm.
to Kaeble. It was the ancestor was a German, probably a German fought either in the Revolutionary War or something like that. The Hessians came.
Yep.
They were the name wasn't Kaeble originally, so so I looked into it. She's not a grandniece, but she's a cousin,
Okay.
and uh, and he earned a Victoria Cross at a place called Neuville-Vitasse, Arras. And he was badly wounded. Lewis Gunner. He died. I looked into it. He died in a brick factory where one of the 56 London division had one of their field hospitals. He went there,
Okay.
He either died on arrival or died there, and then he was brought to Juan Quentin Communal Cemetery, which is a civilian cemetery in a little village, where they buried guys that were died of wounds. Uh, and now the village randomly contacted me saying, "Can you help us? We want to name our church square La Place Joseph Kaeble." And I said, "Well, you're going to laugh, but my girlfriend's his cousin." So then she bought me a ticket. She said, "I got to go see this. I got to see this." She never heard of Joseph Kaeble. Well, do your listeners know what a Victoria Cross is?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. He's a VCMM. Probably didn't speak a stitch of English. Was with the 22nd Battalion, and then he's there. So I've invited her to lay a wreath, and I started a GoFundMe for the village because they want to raise money for to rename the square on the anniversary of his death in June 2025, La Place du Caporal Joseph Kaeble. And there's controversy as to how it's pronounced. She says Kaeble. Everybody in the Great War says Keeble, but it doesn't matter. He was a young man who died courageously, and I thought I was kind of done with this Great War stuff. I thought I'd done everything, and then how am I going to say no to my girlfriend?
Right.
Yeah.
And you're never done. There's always more. There's always more to do.
I'd appreciate it if you put the link to my GoFundMe on your on this podcast, because we're desperately trying to raise like $3,000 US
Yeah.
to pay for the plaque. But
send me the link and we can add that to the show notes. No problem.
So that's my next project.
Okay.
In September, I've been invited. My friend Philippe, I've done nothing for it. He's one of my readers. His great uncle disappeared at the Battle of the Frontiers on August, I think, 28, 1914.
Okay.
And for the last 5 years, he renewed the memorial, and he does a ceremony every year in a little place called Fontenoy. So we're going there for the weekend. And then the guy was from the Somme. He was a Somme regiment. That regiment went on the fight on the Marne. So we're going the next weekend for a 4-village tour of what the Somme guys did in the Battle of the Marne, 1914.
Okay.
And it's by invitation. It's all in French. It's completely a local initiative, but I'm so privileged to be invited to go and be there. In every village, what they did is they highlighted a soldier who was killed in the village. And they tell the story. So I'm going to do a lot of translating for my friends that are coming with me. But when the Germans lost the Battle of the Marne, they sent incendiary shells in one of the villages, and there's still descendants there. A family of 11 kids, 8 died in the cellars of asphyxiation.
Oh.
And they're just doing this on the town square. And I've asked, I said, can we? The family's still there. That's how they know the story. Can we go see the cellar? Like, can we go? That is such a touching story. It's a one like you'd go. Like it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to see a battlefield that we're not familiar with. I don't know anything about the, but I'm happy to go as a tourist and not do any work.
Yeah, I hear you. No, those experiences do pop up when you're out there. So awesome. So we got Banting, we got the Kaeble Memorial. This is fantastic. You're heading off there, man. I hope you have a great trip. Sounds like I think it's going to be a good one. I'm going to look forward to following that on. I
hope everybody understands my accent
on Facebook. Yeah. No problem there. Yeah. So Michel, I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to come on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to hear from you. So I'm going to link in the podcast show notes. We'll get your GoFundMe up there. I've got your publisher's website that gives a better display of your work. So we do have some European listeners to the podcast, so they probably have faster access, better access to getting your books. But yeah, hopefully we can generate some interest for you, man, and getting these stories in English, because this is important. Like I want to know these stories, and I'm sure I'm not the only person, man. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you. Good night.